groundbreaking blockbuster films: Titanic, The Terminator, the Avatar series. His movies have won over 20 Oscars and are some of the very highest grossing and most expensive films of all time. But James Cameron is much more than an Academy Award-winning filmmaker. He's also a scientific explorer, engineer, environmentalist, and pioneer of new technologies. His innovations have descended to the bottom of the ocean and soared into space. Cameron's latest documentary series, Secrets of the Elephants, dives into the lives of those majestic and mammoth animals. It will premiere on April 21st on National Geographic. Cameron's commitment to sustainability also inspired a move to New Zealand, where he and his wife live on an organic farm. We sat down recently here in New York. James Cameron, what an honor.
It's a huge honor to be on your show, Fareed. Thank you.
So if you look at the 4 highest grossing films in the history of the world, you've made 3 of them.
Yeah, it turns out that way.
And what's extraordinary to me is, each of these has grossed more than $2 billion.
Right.
But they do it all over the world. They do well everywhere. I was in India when Avatar, the new one came out. And India, as you know, is consumed with Bollywood movies. Hollywood has very small presence.
Historically, yeah.
Except Avatar was everywhere.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, what is it that you have found that appeals to so many people?
The things that I care about are trying to reach people emotionally. But I also am very visual, right? And, I get a lot of ideas from dreams and things like that. And I think that taps into the subconscious that we all kind of share, if you believe that kind of Jungian view of life. But I also think about that global market. And I think I don't want to do stuff that's just based on kind of current memes and current little cultural kind of ideas and trends. I want to go back to sort of classic ideas, almost back to Greek tragedy and things like that, things that affect everybody. So, for example, the new Avatar film is about family and bonds that we all share in any culture, any religion, any language group around the world. Titanic, about love and sacrifice and duty, which are things that, for example, maybe in Asia, mean a lot to people. So even though they had a language barrier to surmount to watch the film, it meant something to them. So I try to just tap into universals of human experience. Beyond that, I could get very specific about visual effects and things like that. But I think it's that universal sense of who we are as human beings.
You said you think about the world audience, the global audience.
Yes.
Do you think it helps that you live in New Zealand? You're sort of out of America.
I think it's interesting to live outside. I lived in Los Angeles for 47 years. I grew up in Canada before that. Now that I live in New Zealand, I think it's interesting to look back on American culture and society and politics and so on from an outside viewpoint and get a morning paper that sees it in a very different way. I think it's healthy, and I think more Americans should do that. Look into the bubble from the outside. I think if you think about it in a broader sense, that's how the Avatar movies work. They ask us to see through the eyes of nature, through these blue people, back at ourselves and our sins against nature that we collectively as a civilization are doing. Because I think maybe 1 in 1,000 people that goes to an Avatar movie actually roots for the humans, but we're a human audience rooting against ourselves, if you think about it in a strange way, through these kind of aspirational characters that really represent the best of us, or the way we imagine we can be, or maybe the way we used to be thousands of years ago.
Do you think, I think about this because when you look at Asia, which is modernizing and urbanizing so fast,
right,
they're in many ways despoiling the environment even more, and yet the movies do very well in Asia.
Yeah, I think we suffer collectively from nature deficit disorder, and we all need to reconnect. And I think because we were less urbanized when we were kids, certainly my age and maybe even the next generation behind me, we long for that sort of thing we had as children, where we were down in the grass, we were down in the soil, we collected birds and butterflies and flowers and things like that. We don't get that anymore. Our lives are so urbanized. We're here in New York right now. It's hard to even imagine that, you know, when you just look out at that technical landscape. I think we long for it. And so people see something that they want in their dreams. You know, I think there's something that's very kind of primitive about it, and primitive in us, atavistic, right? That we long for. And I just hope we can reconnect with that, because, you know, our urban life is devastating nature in order to support it.
How does the subconscious work as best you can tell? Because you were saying you get a lot of your ideas from dreams.
Yeah.
You're appealing to people in a way that they don't think of themselves, I think, a lot of people, as having this nature deficit disorder. I mean, they're much going around there. But somehow, you know, it does feel like you're tapping into that.
Right. Well, I do think we have certain innate programming that's at a very deep level, much lower than higher brain function. And I think our subconscious, when it's operating either in the background during the day or at night, where it sort of takes over, is sort of processing internally in a way that scientists don't really understand dreams and the psychological purpose that they serve. I think they're kind of like a generative AI. You know, I think they're making imagery from a vast data set that's our entire experience in life, and it's just making imagery, and then another part of our brain is supplying a narrative that goes along with it. And the narrative doesn't always make much sense, you know, but we're storytelling to ourselves all night long, or at least during REM sleep, you know. And I'm not a dream expert, I want to say up front, or a neuroscientist, but I think this is what's happening. And we're trying to make sense of the world, because we don't really remember like a videotape. We remember stories, right, like strings of beads. You know, I went to a party, okay, I remember where it was, that's a bead. But you can't play back a whole tape of the whole thing. I'll remember this as an image, a picture of you, and some of the topics that we talked about, but I won't be able to play it back like a videotape. And if I do play back, you know, a recording of it, I'll go, oh yeah, we said that was cool. Or not. Or I embarrassed myself. I wish I could take it back.
So Billy Joel said to me that he gets a lot of his music from dreams, and that,
interesting,
you know, he'd get up or even later on he'd realize, and it's always the core, which was for him always the melody, the harmony, not the words. The words were a later add-on.
Interesting.
What do you explain how your dreams work?
It sounds to me like for him it's musical. For me it's images, and you know, so just a bunch of random, sometimes very surreal images, sometimes beautiful, sometimes terrifying. And I've lately been thinking that there's a little bit of, it's not just the picture. There's a little metadata running underneath it that's telling me what the picture means. You know, so for example, the Terminator was based on a single image of a chrome skeleton emerging out of fire. But the metadata said it used to look like a man covered in flesh, and the fire burned it away. And so it's actually a story segment. And then you start putting those story segments together, and then it starts to turn into a story you want to tell to other people. And I think storytellers sitting around the campfire in a cave 50,000 years ago were doing the same thing.
And so when you get those images, do you say to yourself, you know, first of all, just mechanically, do you write it down?
Write it down sometimes, or actually draw it.
Right.
I remember you
have a background as an artist, right?
As a figurative artist. Yeah, exactly. Representational. You know, illustrator, I guess, would be a better term. But yeah, I used to love to draw and paint, and that's right. I still do, but not as much, because now in my current level of work in film, the film is my painting, the film is my art, and I get to work with the very best, you know, illustrators and design artists in the world. So I don't do it as much as I used to. I work through them, and they're better than I ever was, so it's okay.
But movies are a strange kind of art, because it's partly an art, but partly there's a lot of technology. I mean, look at if you could see, there's just so many cameras around us, and lights and sound and
computers.
You really embrace the scientific part of all that.
Yeah, I love the tech. I love the engineering. My mother was an artist and my father was an engineer, and so, you know, it's genetics writ large. You know, I love the tech, and I love creating new tech. You know, and I was at the advancing wavefront of CG as it started to sweep through, and this was going back 30 years now. But, you know, The Abyss was the first CG character that was a soft surface character. We had this kind of water tentacle that formed faces. And then that went on to the liquid metal guy in Terminator 2. And from there, it progressed to other things. Jurassic Park, which I didn't do, Steven Spielberg did it. But then, you know, it built very rapidly. We could see the future was coming, that it would be that would be CG. So I like the tech side, but it's not, the irony is not lost on me that we use literally petabytes of storage and all these computer monitors and everything to make a movie about the most naturalistic state of the human experience, you know, and albeit they're blue aliens, but we're really celebrating that kind of indigenous wisdom keeper kind of idea using all this technology
And
loving it.
we will be back with more of my interview with James Cameron. Stay with us. Let's talk a little bit more about technology and engineering, because, I mean, after you made the first Avatar film, the obvious thing, given what a huge hit it was make a sequel. And no, you made a submarine.
I made a submarine.
You know, and it took years for you to do that.
Yeah, I was actually doing it in the background of finishing Avatar. It was a 7-year project to build the sub, and it overhung the delivery of Avatar by another couple of years. So that film came into the marketplace 2009-10, and by 2012 we had a finished sub that we were out diving in the deep trenches in Papua New Guinea, and then ultimately the Challenger Deep.
So it's almost, one way to think about you is as a kind of explorer, technologist, inventor, who's, I mean, that seems to be motivating you a lot, and then then you become a movie maker.
Yeah, kind of. That's true. Well, I think a key aspect of exploration is coming back and telling the story. You know, I think that the best explorers are also good storytellers and good recorders of the image. Shackleton took big 8x10 camera with him, and some of those plates are so famous and iconic that they schlepped with them against all odds. And if you know the Shackleton story, I'm sure you do. Yeah. What incredible odds that they fought to get back, but they brought back the pictures, you know, and the pictures coming back from the moon that the first Apollo landing, you know, crew brought back are so important and so iconic for us. So yeah, it's not a big stretch for me from filmmaking to exploration. I just shift my filmmaking to documentary mode, you know, and I found documentaries to be pretty challenging. You know, you spend a lot of time in the editing room on a documentary.
Why?
Because there's no script, you know, and with ocean exploration, the ocean didn't get your script, so it doesn't exactly show up at 9 a.m. to do what you want it to do. And so you get a lot of random footage, and you never know quite if you've got a story or not until you get into the cutting room, and then it emerges, and it might take a year or more to cut a good documentary.
Tell me about being vegan, and how it relates to your admiration for nature.
Well, look, nature is threatened by a lot of different things simultaneously. And here's a really interesting thing. So if you think of it like a Venn diagram, and you've got deforestation here, loss of habitat, biodiversity loss, you know, carbon in the ocean that's causing the reefs to degrade, and in the atmosphere that's causing climate change. The center of that Venn diagram that connects all of those things and is common to all of them is animal agriculture. Because, you know, water pollution and all these things. So I knew that years ago, and I thought, well, too bad. We have to eat meat to be healthy, right? And then I saw a film called Forks Over Knives, which dispelled that myth. And then that took me to the China study, and I read that very, very thick, dense book, lots of graphs and things like that, a lot of double-blind studies. And really drilling down on the data, I realized that film was right. We don't need animal protein. In fact, it's very deleterious for our health. But I was approaching it from a sustainability standpoint, and I thought, wow, one elegant solution. We just stop. So my wife and I talked to Susie and I, and we just went. I hate to use the word vegan because I think it's off-putting. People think it's kind of a hippie new age kind of thing, as opposed to a whole food plant-based diet, which requires no animal whatever, anything, cheese, milk, meat, fish, any of that. And I've been on that for 11 years, so I just wanted to be like a guinea pig in an experiment and see for myself. Same thing as exploration. I want to go to the bottom of the ocean and see for myself.
You could do anything you want, but you want to make more Avatar movies. What is it? Is it that, you know, this is part of a continuing project?
It's an ongoing project, and I decided to make it a kind of an epic project because I like big challenges, and I'm written out through the end of Avatar 5. We're finished shooting through the end of Avatar 3, actually a bit into 4. So this is a big kind of epic cycle that I feel I have to complete. I also looked at it long and hard. Like you said, I didn't go right to shooting the sequel. I took time out. I did a sub. I did some other things. I did a lot of work with indigenous communities around the world because they had responded to the messaging in Avatar and drew me into their world. And I thought, okay, I can do some good here. And I started to realize I think I can do more good with another Avatar movie than getting caught in 1,000 small local battles where I'm not an expert. You know, there were people already on the ground. So I formed a foundation called the Avatar Alliance Foundation to fund some of these NGOs to fight these battles. And then I started to leapfrog ahead to do some more Avatar films because I figured I just need to keep on with that messaging about how we need to connect with each other, how we need to reconnect with nature, how we need to defend her. You know, I think of it in the story as a kind of a female deity because we all have a mother and we understand that we're dependent on that mother. So it's a natural, and that natural symbology comes out of so many different indigenous sources as well.
That's a wonderful way to very elegantly and simply summarize, it seems to me, your life's message, which is we need to connect with each other and connect with nature.
Exactly. Our empathy will save us, you know. But empathy is a double-edged sword because typically we cast the circle of empathy too close. And that creates an in-group that we fight for and an out-group that we fight against. You know, so we need to expand that spotlight of empathy to the people that are just like us around the world, especially the ones that are suffering because of climate change and some of the other degradations. Well, we can do it, you know. Movies can help, you know. Education can help, you know, and just our own will to survive can help.
But for you, the battle isn't finished until we've extended that empathy to the whole world.
Exactly. We need to think of ourselves as the indigenous people of planet Earth, and we're all part of the same tribe. You know, they have a saying in New Zealand, which is the team of 5 million. And so when the virus hit, the team of 5 million worked together, and they wound up with a vaccination rate of around, I think, 96 or 97%, as opposed to, and you know better than I, somewhere around 66% in the U.S. So that team spirit, you know, and they extended their empathy bubble out to 5 million people in a whole country. And that doesn't happen here, and it doesn't happen in a lot of countries, but it happens there. So now the question is, can we push it another couple of orders of magnitude farther out, you know, and see our commonality everywhere?
James Cameron, pleasure to have you on.
Wow, that went fast, and it was great. Thanks.
Thanks to all of you for being part of my program this week. I will see you next week.